Good evening, everybody, or afternoon, I should say. Today is October 21st. We're here for the purposes of the Board of Education study session. So we're going to go ahead and get started with that. The topic tonight is with our long-term school closure and district reconfiguration process that we're in. So this is really our opportunity to dive deeper into the topic and the three items that are up for proposal right now. There was a few questions that were generated out of the last board meeting, and of course, there's opportunity to ask more questions. There isn't a formal presentation tonight, but it is, like I said, our chance to just discuss further and more deeply into these topics. So, Liz, is there anything that you, or Dr. Grant, is there anything that you wanted to add?
Just that we had sent some answers to previous questions. I need to speak into the mic, don't I? We had sent some answers to previous questions that the board raised in the last meeting. And then really wanted to give you an opportunity to ask others. We have people in the room who can answer those. And then talk to each other about other information that you may need to help get to a decision. So are there things that we've not yet provided that you would like us to provide additional information, and we can do that.
Annie?
Can I ask a question about the Nibley Park extension? So it looks like it says those spaces would possibly accommodate the expansion of the DLI program, which will require additional classroom space. I was looking at the enrollment numbers for the other board agenda items and did not see the DLI program numbers. And I was wondering if we have those numbers to understand why they would need those additional classrooms.
Yes, or I can kind of explain to the best of my ability. I'm going to have Tiffany step in, Dr. Hall, if needed. But when we first placed DLI there, we did with kindergarten and first grade. And then our plan has been that so we moved the combined DLI ELP class from Emerson to Nibley Park. And that one's being grandfathered out. So that we're not accepting new students into that program, but we're serving those who were in the program. And so that one's being grandfathered out over the years.
The magnet one?
It was yes, ELP/DLI, the combined.
So that one's going away at Nibley Park eventually.
That one will go away eventually. And as that one goes away, DLI from K1, and now we're serving K1 and 2 this year, so that next year we'd serve K1, 2, 3, as those students then are kind of grandfathered in. But as they're grandfathered in, we need more classrooms.
Yes.
In speaking with Principal Green, that is how they would use the additional space, is they'll move those into those classrooms that would, if they were emptied.
Okay, so currently the DLI ELP is being grandfathered out. What grades are they in right now? Like 3, 4, 5? Or?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The difference is the neighborhood program that we started K1, 2 has 2 classrooms at each level, but the ELP program has 1.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, so just for numbers purposes, the not DLI, just neighborhood program. So is each grade basically K1, 2 have 3 classes? At least 3, sometimes more. Okay.
2 DLI and 1 or 2 regular neighborhood.
Okay. Okay.
And really quickly, Annie, on the data sheet that they had for the enrollment numbers, the second tab says enrollment by grade, and that breaks down the magnet ELP regular school program and the DLI for Nibley Park.
Okay. I was just trying to get my head around the numbers of DLI and what that would look like in the future. So thanks.
I believe also Nibley's enrollment has gone up the last couple of years, and so I know they're working to bring students into the district, both into the neighborhood program and the DLI program.
I have a related question about Nibley. In the last meeting, we talked about when Brian Connolly was presenting, he talked about facility design being excluded from the categories that were studied. And one of the aspects of that facility design is not just the number of classrooms for a K-8, but additional special rooms, like there are 2 gymnasiums in that building, for example. So no amount of DLI students is going to warrant an extension that is meant to house a middle school. There would be no use for things like the second gym. So the question I understood that was asked in the last meeting was, could facility design be studied? And do we have any additional information about a study of the design of Nibley Park, but also innovations, which is similarly specific and particular?
What would you be interested in knowing about the design that would help on this question?
Well, the gym would be one example, that the building was designed to house a middle school model, and expanding elementary school models does not provide utility for all of those spaces. Nibley has other unique design features, like it's designed to be a fully walkable school for the existing boundary, and I don't believe it had a bus lane in a past iteration of discussions about Nibley. So I don't know the answer because I am not the person who's studying the facility design. So I'd be curious whether staff added that to their study and what they would have to share that would be useful.
Maybe that's the part I don't understand is how, just to help, I'm curious to try and understand, how does there are 2 gyms in the building, and one is a full gym that was added on into this kind of middle school pod that was created when that was built to provide for. The other gym is a small gym where half is a lunchroom and half is the gym, and then they can open it up as needed. So there is that extra space. I'm not sure what else to say about that might be useful in looking at reconfiguration of grades or the bus question about the bus lane. Like, I'm not sure how to relate it to the question of its 7th and 8th grade.
I think it relates because we're tasked with potential long-term reconfiguration of the school, but also then the long-term use of that building. So questions like, how would a multi-million-dollar investment be used, I think are valuable to ensure we're fulfilling the promises of past boards who made that investment. And would it be able to accommodate additional busing for DLI is one question, and what would the gym be used for is another. That, what is the long-term use of a multi-million-dollar investment by a past board?
Can I say something? I think this is an important point because as I've been thinking about these decisions with these closures, I have had to, in my mind, put a boundary between the decision of the reconfiguration or the decision of closure of innovations and the potential building use in the future. I think it's easy to conflate those two and think about, okay, this facility is housing these students. Now, if we close it, what will we use the facility for? But I think it is important to only consider at this stage the merit of the actual closure itself and the data regarding that. Maybe I just don't think we're at the point of saying what would we use the space for. So that's just a thought, because I had the same thought with innovations classrooms. I thought, okay, there's CTE in the downstairs. Now, while we're considering a Riley CTE center, would we put CTE in the upstairs, or are we going to talk to Slick and take that, but if we start going there, I think it takes us off task, and there's a little bit of drift from the mission at hand, which is this fulfilling its purpose? What is the community saying? What is the fiscally responsible thing to do?
To finish with my question about innovations, I think what's interesting is that our policy actually tasks us with this, and we were told in our last meeting that part of the policy, facility design, was excluded. So the thing I'm asking for, which is a study of facility design, is actually in the policy, and we were told it was excluded. It was not considered. So I'm asking simply for a study of the facility design, which would include probably potential purposes of that, because my question about innovations is the same. I'm concerned that now we are risking giving up essentially what is a free central building that used to house all CTE. And when I say essentially free, how much is the lease?
So we don't, I think it's like $1 a year, one of those type of things, because we paid for the construction of the building. That was basically a prepaid lease.
So the reason why I think these things are entangled is because that building serves multiple purposes. It's totally free, and if we have no purpose for it, we need to carefully consider what the design of that facility was, because the design of the facility is meant to have a small number of innovation students. It's meant to be small because we don't have the available parking through Salt Lake Community College, and thus it could also accommodate CTC students who travel to and from the site throughout the day. So there's not a lot of utility for that building without a clear study of the facility design that was meant for a certain purpose. And if we close the certain purpose that it was expressly meant for and built for, which is true in both of these cases, we have questions, and we were told they were excluded from the study, and I would just like them to be added per our policy.
Just to add a couple of pieces, maybe when we did the last school closure round, we were very careful in the ways you're describing, Board Member Romero, Romano, sorry. to
It's
keep-
okay, a lot of people do it.
Do they? I'm not sure I should do that. But to keep questions separate, because we wanted to be careful in the way you're talking about, that we're not closing a school in order to do something else with it. It was that more limited question of what do we do with low enrollment, and should this school be closed? And then now we've got those larger questions about property. So there is that for the old stuff. The reason we didn't really, I'm not sure the language we used in the study about the exclusion of facility design, but we didn't see a connection with the decision. And that piece still has me a little baffled about how to make the what information to bring forward, and you named a couple for Nibley. And if I may, Ms. Kindle just had maybe something to add from a.
Well, I just want to be clear that when we're looking at section 4 for the grade level reconfigurations within schools, that doesn't talk about doing a further study of specific factors, right? So there are no specific factors in that section that had to be studied or that needed to be included or were specifically excluded. It's just based on the recommendation of the superintendent to reconfigure schools and then holding public comment to get input on the recommendation. That's how that process works. So unlike when we're doing a closure of a program or a boundary adjustment that does have specific factors in the administrative procedures, this reconfiguration does not have those specific factors.
So you're saying that that would maybe apply for innovations, but not Nibley Park?
No, it's the opposite.
Opposite,
It applies
yes.
for Nibley Park.
Okay, sorry, my brain is a
Grade
little
level
slow right now.
configuration.
Okay,
We
yeah.
decided to bring you more information than was required in the
Okay.
policy, just so that you'd have it available.
And I would also like to caution that one of the issues with talking about what we're gonna do with the building after the fact might be telegraphing that we are not fully studying it, and might be telegraphing that we've already made a decision despite the board not having a vote. So I think that also plays into how careful we need to be about not getting too far ahead of ourselves in conversations, because then the public might think they don't really care what we have to say, they're not listening for our public input, that they aren't really studying it, they already have a plan for this building, that we're just jumping through the hoops, and that's clearly not anything that we want to telegraph or communicate in any way.
To that end, has the public feedback been updated? Since our last meeting, I haven't had an updated Excel file or a printed copy. Is that available for this discussion?
We talked about having that ready after the October 24th, so after October 24th, so I don't have one on me now. The next time, the collection point in late October, I believe it was the 24th.
Which is Friday, this Friday?
Friday of this week, yeah, was going to be the cutoff time, and then get it ready for, have the printed copies ready after that.
So that we'd be sending that to the board next week in preparation for the next November meeting.
Correct.
Amanda?
I just wanted to add to the conversation that I agree that the closure decision is separate from the future use of it. As Christina stated, for the Nibley Park reconfiguration, following the G5 policy, I do see how with innovations, it kind of plays into it, but it's more, this whole conversation seems to be more focused on the viability of these programs and the benefit to keeping them versus placing them in a setting that may be better utilized for our students. So through the G5 process, we'll get to that point of evaluating what we're going to do with our excess properties, like if innovations becomes an excess property. So I think it's confusing the conversation to put them together at this point. So I appreciate your words, Annie, because you worded it very well. And we will be looking at future use, but it doesn't negate that we still have these three things that we need to decide on, separate of what we planned on doing that with them in the future.
To offer clarification also, this is additionally confusing because Innovations is not our property. Innovations is not in a building that we own. It's in a building that we lease, that we invested to build out for the purpose of housing a CTC and Innovations. So the question's a little bit different. We may have no say in the property use if we actually don't retain a program in that building. And so this is a very complicated question where the facility design and the investment in that facility design really matter. Also related to Innovations on a different topic, did we get an update from the chair? I know that when Mr. Connolly presented to us, he said the SCC minutes didn't talk anything about holding harmless. Did we follow up at all on the community concerns from that meeting? That the SCC was told they would be held harmless for their enrollment, and now we're considering closing their program due to low enrollment? Is there an update on that?
Do you have any further information, Brian? Okay.
No, other than what we stated in the meeting, which was along the lines that the factors that played into G5 itself had changed, and looking at a hard number versus what our old administrative procedures with G5, which wasn't specific toward the number of students in a school. The way G5 looks now is much different than the administrative procedures than what it had been 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Thank you.
I guess my question is, did we share that with the SCC? Did we communicate with the community about how changes to procedures impacted their programs? Or is that only something that we discussed?
I think that's only something we discussed. We could put it on an SCC agenda. Is that what you'd like to see happen?
I would think the community deserves a response to what was said in the community meeting, for sure. And to that end, I do think it's difficult without the updated feedback to also ask all the questions we may have based on what the public comments have been. Like in the last meeting, many people made calls for comment, and we don't know yet what they are, which I think is important.
I do think that concern raised about the SEC in the innovations closure meeting was from a specific individual, and I did ask that individual to follow up with a written email to explain. I did never receive that email, but I do think because it happened in the past, I'm not sure how much of the community is aware of that potential promise or miscommunication that happened. But so I don't know. but yes, I do think it would be responsible to put it in upcoming SEC notes, just for those who are aware of it, who maybe felt betrayed or disappointed by those actions. I do think we do need more public comment, but in reviewing the long-term in-depth study and just looking through the information we do have, I think one thing that stood out to me is the balance between offering specialized programs for small groups that may be benefiting from these programs and, are hoping for those to continue, versus having a broader program with more capacity to meet those students' needs. So in terms of like Nibley Park, it's just saying, Nibley Park is not able to offer the same breadth of courses and elective opportunities that are available in other middle grade settings. And just the enrollment numbers being so low, this has been a challenge of scale, not of teacher qualifications. And similarly with innovations, that because of the limitations of enrolling in in-person SLIC classes and many of them enrolling in online concurrent enrollment, that many of those students have to actually have gone from innovations to East or Highland or West to access those classes. So from a fiscal responsibility perspective and a perspective of having a holistic and comprehensive education or academic curriculum, it does, lead one to question, this kind of would make sense to go in the direction of folding those students into already existing programs. From a social or psychological perspective, we don't really have that information. Maybe the students would still benefit from being in a small program, but whether or not that's possible is a different question. So anyway, that was my thought.
Any other questions or topics that we need to dive into tonight?
Well, I'll just go off of what Annie just said. An individual at one of the high schools had a child at Innovations and talked about that small program benefit for what their child's, I guess, equation is. My desire is that, as we're looking at making our district, I guess, I don't know how to word that properly, but if we, move Innovations into our comprehensive high schools, merge 7-8 into our comprehensive middle schools, and through that process, we also go through this, look at our programs in those comprehensive high schools and see if we do have structures in place to offer those unique settings to students that do benefit from an alternate approach in their education, not just kind of just thrown into the cogs of the normal approach. Like if we're going to be kind of consolidating these programs down, the presumption is we'll be able to use our monies more efficiently and effectively to provide more diverse offerings for our multifaceted student needs.
What do you think that would look like?
Oh, it could be many things, because we do have co-teaching programs that already started over at Highland High School. I believe that they working on ensuring that they're offered at the other comprehensive high schools, and getting them set up so they're functioning successfully. It could be an addition of classrooms that are actually capped at the classroom size, not like an expected full classroom size.
To keep it small, kind of?
Yeah, a lot of different things. And this plays into one of the pieces when it comes to enrollment and FTE allocations for high school versus elementary. That's an area that I'm interested in diving into, is figuring out how those FTE determinations are occurring at our high school levels to ensure that we are properly staffing our schools to really be able to provide a comprehensive experience, because if we're doing it similar to elementary generally, the number of students in a classroom is just, it's black and white. In a high school, there might be a classroom slated for 30 students, but only 20 got enrolled in it. So if you're staffing based on a full classroom for every single high school course, but the reality is that a teacher may only be teaching 20 kids, then we may be limiting our options that way. But that's a whole
Yeah.
other separate discussion. But
Charlotte?
There is Horizonte as well. That's an alternative high school that has smaller class sizes, and that the student body really feels a tight community there.
That has traditionally offered an alternative program for those who want a different setting than in a comprehensive high school. And we want to continue to grow that out at Horizonte.
Yeah, so maybe some funds, could be better. I mean, we could divert them there.
maybe better marketing about Horizonte,
Yes.
because I think a lot of people don't really understand.
I think so too.
I agree. I think as a parent, I'm putting myself in a parent's shoes for innovations, but as a parent, going from innovations, I don't think I would necessarily think, oh, Horizonte is the best option for my student. But I think understanding what those options are, and like you said, maybe providing a little bit different FTE allocation, or possibly class sizes, or possibly an additional counselor for the group, or whatever it is, that there's some transition designations.
Yeah, I have one thought about the conversation about Nibley Park, and then an additional question. The thing I worry about in talking about the logistic issues or academic issues that are perceived with Nibley Park is that it's not our only K-8 school. So I have a K-8 charter in my precinct. In Bryce's precinct, there's been a charter that has been different configurations from 6 to 12, and then 7 to 8 only housed at Bryant, and then the rest at the high school, and there's different conversations about those. I think our general counsel was wise to talk about what telegraphing messages looks like, and it telegraphs a message to Open Classroom and also to SLCSD when we do things like this, that we'll no longer be providing programs of choice. So this district went through many phases, and one was the choice, right? That we were trying to capitalize on the amount of students that were predicted to be lost to charter schools, who interestingly have had, if you look at it statistically, some of those fears didn't come to pass, but some of them did. I think we now, though, risk telegraphing a message that we're no longer providing these specialty programs. And why would we say one is academically poor, but then charter it? So I think that's a thing missing from this dialogue, is just a precedent about what it means to have a specialty program. And our policy's undergone many changes throughout that. That's just a comment, but my question is, what's the plan for faculty in these buildings?
Well, just first to say thanks for raising SLCSD, because I wanted to raise that as another
And Open
program
Classroom.
within, well, I was thinking in terms of innovations in response to the question of, where else do high school students go? Many families choose SLCSD as an alternative that fits for them. But in terms of, the second question.
What is a plan for faculty? We were given a very clear statement in the last G5 process that there would be no rifts. What is the plan for faculty in both grade level reconfiguration, magnet discontinuation, and a potential innovations closure?
Yeah, we haven't, and I have not in conversations with senior staff pinned that down exactly. Or we could just state here.
I mean, we've had informal conversations. We haven't made the official decision, but because, last time we were talking a lot larger amount of faculty than we're talking in this one. We have enough turnover every year that I don't anticipate there would be any need that, we could guarantee those faculty job placement for the following years. But again, we have, last year, I think we made an official declaration that this is what we've done, and so we haven't had the discussion formally to make that official declaration, but.
We need to formalize
How many
our
faculty?
decision-making that way.
Just to back up, how many faculty would be impacted by this change total?
Brian, do you happen to know that number?
We have one in Washington. We have 3 FTE that are assigned to 7th and 8th grade at Nibley Park right now, so I would anticipate those 3. And I believe the number at Innovations is 6. So between the 3 sites, I think it's 10 FTE total.
Thank you.
Oh, right. Person at Washington is a 1-year only contract. I'm not sure about the others, so we're looking 9 or fewer.
Thank you.
For innovations, that can't be everything, because you figure the principal stays at Washington, right? If the program's discontinued, the assistant principal, the counselor. For Nibley Park, it's 3 teaching FTE, but everything else is absorbed. What are the other FTE associated with innovations that are not classroom educators?
In previous years, weren't they combined with the CTE center? So the administration is shared?
But how many people is that?
So I'm just going off the top of my head, there's a .5 principal, there is a full-time secretary, I believe they have a counselor, and that might be it.
I thought they had a vice principal, or an associate, I would say vice principal, but assistant principal. They don't.
I mean, throughout the years, it's been kind of more, because the CTE and innovations was kind of so intertwined, sometimes it might have appeared that way. But I don't think they've ever had an official assistant principal.
So it's a half-time principal, secretary.
We're receiving corrections from the audience. Approved it.
And is that
The
shared?
board
with-
approved it.
Innovations does?
Is that
The
shared with?
board approved it. It
Yeah, I
came to
think
us as a
I met
change.
the
That one is a
assistant principal.
half-time assistant principal and then half-time CTC?
No, we have a CTC coordinator, like a person specific, and then we have a assistant principal. I can double check.
Please do that. That's not my understanding.
I did meet the assistant principal. I remember.
male?
We met.
Last year,
No, this year, at the closure meeting. It was a female.
yes.
I have names, but I don't know if you want.
Yeah, I think I met her, so.
They do have names.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it's
You
necessary.
could
but
please
yeah.
check on that, Emily. I thought the assistant principal position is overseeing the CTC work, and I thought was paid purely on CTE funding,
Oh,
as I understood that, so.
Well, and my comment to that, like, it's good to have these conversations and see that we have the FTE that we do need to consider where they're going to move to. It's a relatively small numbers, and we know that we have turnover. And I would hope that, what we did learn from the last school closure is that, and the reason we changed to G5 is these decisions can be made far enough in advance so that they have the opportunity to put their name in the hat for preferred locations they want to move to. It seems like it's a minor concern because we always have positions opening up, it seems like.
That was Logan Hall's determination, is that there's enough turnover that, as Alan had stated, we thought there'd be positions available. Yeah.
So just looking at the finances, the only administrator charged to the innovations account is the portion of Laura DeShazel. There is no other person charged to that account. And then we have the secretary and then a counselor.
A full-time secretary?
Yes.
It's split between the CTC and innovation.
CTC has their own secretary.
so the .5 principal, the full-time secretary, and the full-time counselor? Is that what?
Double check here. Yeah, full-time counselor, .5 principal, and full-time secretary.
Board Member Anderson stepped out, but I would like to kind of go off here she is, the observation that was made about what messaging we're sending to the community regarding school choice and specialty options. I do think, at this point, if you take it as a snapshot and say that, oh, look, the district is considering closing these specialty programs, like a K through 8 program or an innovations type of early college program, if you take that as a snapshot, perhaps that could be a negative messaging to families. I do think that if the messaging could be a little bit more comprehensive or nuanced, I think people understand that demographics shifting and student enrollment declining when the charters were made for SLCSD or open classroom, that wasn't the case at the time. Maybe it was forecasted, but it wasn't quite the conversation we're having now. So I do think taking all of the information together, it's not a message that we're trying to send that school choice options are being limited. I think the message is sending, we have these school choice options already, and the public charters are filling an important need, and will continue to fill that need, that because of lower enrollment options, do not need to be duplicated by the district itself in public. So I don't think that's quite the message we're going to try to send. Whether or not that's what families or students and parents interpret is beyond our control. But I do think because we're offering so many CTE and concurrent enrollment in our comprehensive high schools and middle schools, I do think we are trying to still send a message that, look, we're giving students different options within these larger programs. But yeah.
To respond quickly to that, the thing I'm talking about is that, but also more specific, and I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think with open classroom specifically, we've heard in meeting after meeting that different people find the opportunities of a K-8 to be academically insufficient. That's kind of been a through line of the conversation. So it's very, I'm trying to think of what adjective to use, upsetting to specific open classroom families who are in what is a K-8 model, who are hearing in public meetings that we find it academically insufficient as a district to have a K-8. So I think specifically it's about that. To me, I think leading out with the feasibility and administrative challenges of running a K-8 as the district as compared to a charter is much more compelling than parsing the alleged academic insufficiency, which I actually find to be pretty specious, especially given that it's a choice that is approved by the state that does fulfill all of the curricular requirements. But the message when we do continue to talk about the academic performance as a justification for grade level reconfiguration as opposed to an administrative preference, which I think is actually the more realistic interpretation, that is what is frustrating to a family in a K-8 charter, a hypothetical family. I'm saying like the family who stands in for the whole, that is in a model that they hear in our meeting being called inadequate.
I don't think we're necessarily calling the model inadequate. We are saying at this small of a scale, we cannot offer as comprehensive of academics or as many FTE to provide all of the maybe course options that some families would want. I think that's a difference.
I mean, I would just counter that that's what open classroom is as well. It is the same scale. So we are saying that a school of that scale is not sufficient, which sends a message, rather than what is, I believe, true, that it is more challenging as a public district to operate a K-8 model than it is as a charter to operate a K-8 model. They're different things. They have different layers of choice. And not framing it that way has been a real challenge across the board for all of these recommendations. Framing it as feasibility as a public district with declining enrollment, rather than looking at these merits of the program, which people are choosing these programs for these reasons. They're choosing to stay in Nibley K-8 because they do not want to go to Hillside or Clayton or a traditional middle school in their own district. It's a deliberate choice. Innovations is a deliberate choice. And saying we can't sustain the choice is different than saying the choice is insufficient. And I think that where this has failed to reach a number of families impacted is in identifying the difference between those two things.
I think that's great. I think talking about the feasibility of it for the district is a good message.
I also think it's important to lean into some other conversations that we've had that might change the narrative or the feeling or perception on the insufficiency that you're talking about, Ashley, which is, my understanding is that the K-8 model isn't necessarily insufficient, but that there's some really specific challenges relative to the delivery of education and the type of credentials, not credentials, but the type of certifications that an elementary K-6 teacher has versus a middle school teacher would have, right? And then, of course, there's some curriculum differences as well that might make that challenging. I thought we've had some conversations about that. I'm looking at Dr. Hall, but she's busy on her computer. But I don't know if it's as much insufficient as to what you're pointing out too, like the district where there's some challenges in running the K-8 model. And maybe that might help with some of those perception elements too.
And the other thing that I think that we need to remember is Nibley Park did not have very many teachers for the 7-8 program. And what I heard was when a teacher was absent, the negative ramifications for those students when those absences occurred. It's easier to absorb an absence when you have a lot more teachers in a setting and a lot more, I guess, different dynamic, but whenever you're in an environment where there's so few teachers providing that education in such a small configuration, it's a detriment to the student's education.
Our quick question in relation to the open classroom's curriculum and model of delivery of education is different than Nibley Park's, correct?
Can you say that one more time? If that
Is-
question was to me.
Yeah, well, I'm just asking it to anyone. Open Classroom, which is K through 8, has a different curriculum and delivery of that curriculum, which is part of the reason why Open Classroom is a charter. Right? Then
They are a
Nibley Park
charter
would,
and
yeah.
therefore able to do
do
that
it,
a
yeah.
little differently. And yes, the
So-
two are a
And
little
to be fair,
different.
I mean, we're able to do all of this. Like, this was one of the first, if not the first, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, K-8s established in the state. And there are, I think, 35, 37 K-8s that operate, all approved by USBE. Most of them are charters, not all of them are charters. I think we're the first public district to create a K-8 to capitalize on that interest. I think this is, where we get into the weeds is thinking that this is different, and it's actually really quite unspecial if you look at the way in which the state sanctions and approves this. But Open Classroom does things differently because they've gone in and out of being a cooperative model. They have blended classrooms, but both Open Classroom and Nibley Park are able to do things differently, still following all of the requirements of the State Board of Education. So I think that that's important to clarify.
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying, what I'm saying is, the messaging we're giving is, at this point, the K through 8 model at Nibley Park may not be feasible for the district to continue operating, period. And also, Open Classroom is filling a slightly different need than Nibley Park is filling. So it's a little bit apples to oranges comparison. And in discussing closure of Nibley Park, it in no way is discouraging or saying it's academically insufficient at Open Classroom. That's what I'm clarifying. Because I don't think it is saying that at all.
I'd like to suggest kind of both things that you're talking about are true at the same time, which is that these are different programs at these different schools, that there are administrative challenges to operating the program at Nibley Park, that Nibley Park also has never grown to what its aspirations were, which was the underlying assumption of how you would offer the range of courses that could be available there. So instead of getting art one period a day during a certain semester, you get art like an elementary school student does. You get it twice a week for 45 minutes or something like that if they have set it up that way. So those sorts of things are affected by the numbers, as you're mentioning, the number of teachers and the number of students in the school. That's different than maybe the deliberately created K-8 that way, that is able to do a different kind of program.
I have one more question. I know time's drawing near, but I want to clarify one thing. The last time we talked about this issue, when we were in the middle of changing the policy, I did go back and listen to all of the meetings about the establishment of Nibley's K-8. They were far back enough that I had to request them, so you can't just find them online if you're equally curious. And I think it's very edifying in that the things we continue to describe as a problem, like the art rotation, are the purpose of an middle model. So it was never a failure of the promise of the middle school option to have rotations that are not like a traditional middle school, in that it was part of the promise that it was a specific thing. So I just think that's important to clarify. I would invite anyone to go listen to those conversations and meetings. I think it was really valuable and informative. But my last question before our time is concluded is that in the messages we've had about this, we've talked in our policy discussions about trying to vote as early as possible. But now we've been told the timeline has changed and we cannot vote until December. So for the purposes of the public who've been following along with the steps, can you describe why we are delaying the process in our vote?
Yeah, so to give a little more detail on that, when we follow state requirements to do a public hearing, there are particular requirements that we have to meet. Among them are stating the place, the time certain, so you have to have a kind of binding time that you're starting the public hearing. The place and the time and the location, thanks. Well, that's date, location, and time. When we noticed, we have to do that 30 days in advance and again 10 days in advance. When we noticed 30 days in advance, we said it would be at a board meeting on this date. So we gave the date. We didn't specify that the board meeting was at the district office or the time certain for the meeting. So we made an error in our messaging 30 days out. That was our mistake in doing that. So in order to get the public hearing on the agenda properly and to give that 30 days notice with the proper statement that we will hold it at this district office at 7 p.m., I think is what we landed on, then we needed to notice again. So we sent those out. Now that means that we're moving the public hearing from the first meeting in November to the second meeting in November, from November 3rd to November 18. There was an opportunity still to hold the vote on November 18, and we have done that sort of thing where we have a public hearing and then we vote on something that evening. Board leadership, and this was our suggestion too, that we actually give you time between the public hearing and the vote. So we did have to move the vote into December to the December 2nd meeting in order to give time between the public hearing and you hearing feedback on that and then having a vote on December 2nd, which complies with our G5 policy, but the board had given direction for a preference to have it all wrapped up before December. So we were unable to meet that.
Okay, I just have one question, but then I do have a couple of follow-up thoughts. So in the information that was provided as the exhibit for the study session, at the bottom, it says, question, why were the stoves removed from one of the Nibley Park classrooms? And then the response was, we were going to get more information on that in the study session. I would just like to hear that because I don't want to have to hear any more questions about why the stoves were. I want to put that to bed. So.
Great, I'm going to turn to Dr. Hall.
Hi, I can answer that one. We've been doing
Okay.
some research. So the first thing is literally nobody remembers issuing the move to
Directive.
order them. So somewhere on eBay, there are 6 stoves because we don't know where they are.
Okay.
But they were.
That's actually not true,
Oh.
but they're on
Oh,
eBay,
yeah,
just so
maybe
you
they're not on
know.
eBay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
But they were in room 151.
Okay.
And 151 has not been used for the foods and consumer science, the FACS class. I went back as far as 2017-18, and in all of the years, that class was taught on the second floor in rooms 233 and 239. Coming up through the 24-25 school year, when FACS was moved to career and college readiness, which does not require stoves, and FACS is no longer taught at the school. Again, that's not why the stoves were moved, but the stoves were not needed for instruction from 2021, the year that we were closed for 3 quarters, kind of forward, because the curriculum changed from a FACS curriculum, which is only an elective, and we've already discussed that we do not have 7-8 electives at Nibley Park. The required class is the career and college readiness class, and that is not a cooking class. There isn't a cooking module in that class. So while we don't know where the stoves are, I can tell you that they haven't been needed for instruction in several years, and that is probably why they were removed. I don't know if that answers all of the questions, but that is in fact what we have been able to find out. We cannot know, the previous principal does not remember, the current principal does not remember. When the current principal entered the school, they were not in the school. They were not in the classroom, and the previous principal doesn't remember them being moved out of the classroom. Ryan, was there anything else that you got from Dr. Battle on that?
Okay, thank you. I just think it's valuable that we have had a conversation about the stoves and have a definitive explanation on what was occurring here. I just thought-wise, I really appreciate this study session because I think that what we have been able to do is have a conversation about those kind of questions that are out there and how we do message. And to me, okay, the message that I have received is we need to be thoughtful in how we're messaging. And there are, in my mind, 2 specific messages that we're talking about here. The message, and I really appreciated your insights, General Counsel Kendall. I was trying to,
Come up with the title.
come up with the title. I could say doctor, but we attorneys don't use doctor, so General Counsel Kendall. I appreciated your insight in telegraphing, messaging. I think it's really important that the public understands that, no, we weren't looking at these programs because we had other ideas for these buildings. I think that that's really valuable, and I appreciate that. I also think that it's really valuable messaging-wise that we help parents and teachers and other specialty program participants understand that we do value these specialty programs. We are endeavoring to provide those opportunities in the best way that we can when we are dealing with declining student enrollment and the challenges in ensuring that the students that are involved in those programs get the best instruction that they can receive when there's some decline that's occurring. And that's what we're, anyway, I hope my understanding is reflective of your understanding. That is what we're trying to accomplish here. And I hope that that message has come through this study session.
Thank you, Brian.
I have one clarification about the topic Brian raised. I think that it's hard. I think we have a lot of trust to rebuild with impacted faculty, whether or not the grade levels are reconfigured, because it is very hard to get different responses each time about the infrastructure question about this 7-8 pod. And it's very hard to go to a public meeting and hear from the impacted 7-8 faculty something that is diametrically opposed to what staff are reporting in the public meeting. And so it's not to say that there's not reasonable people can't remember things differently or that over time things didn't change, but we also have now put ourselves in a situation where the DLI classrooms did take that space, and so any discussion about the 7-8 pod has sort of pit faculty groups against each other. And I think hearing from such high conflict about faculty, and especially when they hear information in the meeting they think is wrong based on their work every day, that we have a lot of work to do to rebuild trust with faculty beyond just trying to get answers to the questions.
Dr. Grant, we've asked a lot of questions of you and your team. What questions do you have for us, and what do you need from us moving forward?
Direction on what you want brought back to a next discussion of this. So at our next board meeting, we don't have this down as am I on the right page? Yes. We don't have this down as a topic. We do have public comment available, so there will be a public comment period at the November 3rd meeting, just before election night on November 4th. And then we do bring it back again for a public hearing, the time certain public hearing on November 18th. And then, other than that, we don't have another discussion item until we get to the December 2nd board meeting on school closure. So the question of what can we provide you before December 2nd or at December 2nd?
In the interim period, I would just like to reiterate, I'd like to see the public comments regularly. Last time we got them between every meeting, and we've had one this time. And also, I think what I would continue to request is that if we can't have the facility design be studied for Nibley Park for the reasons stated by our general counsel, I would request that we do consider the facility design for innovations at a minimum as part of G5.
I would need help understanding what that means. Honestly, I mean, I really, truly don't know what to bring forward to the board on that, if we were to.
I mean, what I would say is we analyzed the facility design in our last closure process, so modeling it after that, it would be very sufficient. We heard about the number of rooms, we heard about who they were serving, we heard about the constraints of the different rooms. We even got information about the parking stalls to that end. So I would say we've actually already done work like this, and it's about repeating it rather than excluding that category in this case.
Okay, that was a little bit different in that we were looking at 7 buildings at the time, and so some of that was almost a comparison, and then the G5 was a little different, but we can bring that information on innovations about parking availability.
I would just, Dr. Grant, I want to make sure that that's
Classrooms,
direction
but-
from the whole board
Thank you.
before we task you with doing that collectively.
Okay.
Before we get to that, can I just get clarity? I'm looking at the G5, trying to specifically find what you're asking, Ashley, and I presume it is in the procedures to be followed during the year, which an official long-term closure is being contemplated, number 2. And then subsection C17, factors to be considered are financial implications, which may include consideration of operational costs, staffing, utilities, and facility reutilization. Is that the specific piece that you are referring to?
Yeah, and again, the presentation by Brian Connolly outlines this clearly, that these are all of the factors. We actually excluded this factor in this case. I'm suggesting that we shouldn't exclude that factor. We should have information about all the factors in our administrative procedures. And that's what I would speak to.
I'm fine with getting basic information about the facility, like classrooms, what technology there is, size, those types of things. I don't think it needs to be super comprehensive or difficult.
I guess my question would be to Brian. Brian, do we have that information already available? Or, I mean, it's probably just a process that you went through last year when we were looking at school closure as well. For innovations
Yeah, for
particularly.
innovations, it was in the presentation, the number of classrooms. There wasn't, I believe, it was 10 classrooms, or I'm trying to remember off that presentation. Or maybe it was one that I said. But as far as the technology in those classrooms, the other uses for those classrooms, no, I didn't. Or how many parking stalls, anything like that, no, I don't have right now.
So before I get back to your last point here, Amanda, do we want to give direction as a board to have that type of facility information made available to the board before we take a vote on December 2nd?
I was just going to say, personally, I'm good with the information I have. To respect Ashley's request to comply with the G5, then that particular line item of the G5 should be honored. And then I would say, I think that why we keep circling around it is it is a little confusing whenever it's an innovation site and the CTE center is already allocated to move to Riley. Looking at the facility reutilization whenever it's really about the program, do we need to send this G5 back to the policy committee to see what we need to fine tune it again?
They've gone through this process.
That is fine, but I think that there's still more work, especially considering we know that this
we're
is not the
confused,
first
yeah.
time that this is not the only time this will happen.
Just a thumbs up if we want to move forward with. That's the majority of the board, Dr. Grant. And then Amanda, you had one last thing, and this will have to be our last comment and request.
My question, I guess, and I'm like, my question would be to, I guess, more to Ashley, because you've kind of got the largest list of concerns and requests. If we've got 2 public comments and then we go to decision phase, will you be at a place to be able to make your vote at that December 2nd meeting, or do we need to add another discussion to November 3rd or the November 18th board meeting to revisit these topics so that we are fully in a place to have that decision at the December 2nd meeting and not potentially delay this another year?
I have no way to predict what information will be provided, and thus what decision I would make in the public meeting. So I'm not sure how to answer your question. I think it's important that the information be given, but we've talked about a number of ways in which information can be followed up on, including memos to the board that provide information, whether or not the item is discussed.
But would just to be safe, should we add a study session, like on November 18th or something? Is that the question? Or a discussion item or
Report
something?
of some kind.
I mean, I find it hard to predict questions, thoughts, or concerns about hypothetical information that I do not have.
How about this? Dr. Grant, are you able to get that information to the board before our November meetings? I know that's
Yes.
okay. And so how about we see where we are at with that? And then Brian, you and I will obviously be seeking feedback from everybody. And if we do feel like we need to add something to the draft agendas in November, we can communicate that in the coming couple of weeks. Does that sound fair? Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll go ahead and call this closed, or study session closed.